Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Priya Hasan and welcome to our Astrobits. So our session today is we are going to talk about National Space Day and see what are the details about them. So if you all remember last year on 23rd August, Chandrayaan 3 actually made a successful soft landing on the south pole of the moon, and that's why it was decided that August 23rd will be celebrated as the National Science Day, Space Day. And in this thing of that celebration of that, I would like to recollect a few words and a few things about the Chandrayaan mission. So let us first recollect the words of the father of the Indian space program, that's Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. And this is at the time of independence, when India had just got their independence. And to justify the space program, obviously there was opposition because it was considered that India, after colonial rule of more than 300 years, we were not in a state where we could be spending money on a space program. And the justification that Vikram Sarabhai gave to that was the following. He said that there are some people who question the relevance of space activities in the developing nation, but to us there's no ambiguity of purpose. We do not have the fantasy of competing with the economically advanced nations in the exploration of the moon or the planets on manned spaceflight. But we are convinced that if we are to play a meaningful role nationally and in the community of nations, we must be second to none in the application of advanced technologies to the real problems of man and society. And so that was the inception with which the Indian space program was started, where the space program could be actually used for the development of man and society. And initially, there was obviously no plan of actually pursuing complex projects like human spaceflight and extraterrestrial expeditions. But in the early 2000s, there was already the investigation possibility of India's first extraterrestrial exploration. So till then, India was basically concentrating on low Earth orbit satellites, which were being used for various purposes, which was, for example, weather forecasting, or even land surveying, or, for example, communications and things like that. But this is the first time when ISRO actually started to consider the possibility of using satellites and launches to, for example, the moon and other places. This is with the inception of the orbital launch vehicle, for example, the PSLV. So ISRO then started its moon program, which was called Chandrayaan, which comes from Sanskrit, Chandra, which is the moon, and Yan is the vehicle. And therefore, the mission actually included, a rover, spacecraft, a lander, impactor, various things like that. People started considering them. And the Chandrayaan project was first approved by the government in November 2003. And what they actually planned for Chandrayaan 1 was just to have a lunar surface orbiter, which would actually orbit the moon and study the surface chemically and mineralogically. So on November 10th, the Chandrayaan 1 was first launched and it went into a lunar orbit. We don't have the time today, but sometime I will cover of how the Indian space program with our launch vehicles, which are basically meant for low Earth orbit satellites, we actually use a very interesting slingshot mechanism to actually go to the distance of the moon. The moon is about 380,000 kilometers, much further away, and therefore there are very interesting methods used by ISRO to actually launch to the moon. So anyway, this happened in November 10th, and 14 days later, the moon impact, part of the probe was also to have an impact probe, which actually hit the moon lunar surface near the Shackleton crater in the lunar south pole to basically study that area, okay? And what they did is that this was a very important finding by Chandrayaan 1, found by the moon impact probe, is that there's water on the moon. And the public was not informed about this discovery initially till 2009, when NASA's moon meteorology mapper equipment, which was on the Chandrayaan 1, actually confirmed it. So here you have actually images where this is the, it basically used the infrared reflectance, which was monitored by the MMM, the moon meteorology mapper, which was basically made by NASA but launched with Chandrayaan 1. And basically this was the instrument called CHAS, and with that it was the first concrete evidence of water on the moon. So that was the Chandrayaan 1 plan, and then Chandrayaan 2 was launched in 2019. Chandrayaan 2 was a more ambitious project where you didn't have just the orbiter, but you also had a rover and a lander. Okay, that was what was planned. But unfortunately, the orbiter worked out fine, but the lander, it actually crash landed and therefore the lander and the rover, Pragyan and Vikram, actually failed. And then the follow-up mission to this was the Chandrayaan 3, again with a new attempt of having a lander and a rover. Now, in the space program, you don't actually think of failed programs and successful programs because, in principle, the input given from Chandrayaan 2, the orbiter Chandrayaan 2, it very well studied the lunar surface, and therefore, when Chandrayaan 3 had to plan its lander and the rover, it knew the surface very well, and therefore, Chandrayaan's 3 success is actually based on the findings of Chandrayaan 2. And therefore, Chandrayaan 3, when it was launched in 2023, and then it actually, the lander Vikram, which was also called Vikram in the previous mission in Chandrayaan 2, Pragyan was the rover, and the Vikram lander actually managed to do its soft landing on the South Pole, and India became the fourth nation in the world to actually soft land on the moon, and the first one to actually do it in the South Pole region. And then after the landing, the rover Pragyan, it actually came down the ramp and traveled 8 meters. So, and that was the successful thing, making India the third nation after China and Soviet Union to operate a robotic rover on the moon. So here you have an image of the Chandrayaan liftoff. Here you can see the lander Vikram, and this is an image of Pragyan actually rolling out. Pragyan is the rover which actually rolled out. Now, this is not the end of the Indian program. We have Chandrayaan 4, which is being planned, and in this plan now the addition to it is actually to return lunar samples, and therefore what it actually has is there are 4 modules. One is a transfer module, a lander module, a sender module, and re-entry module. So the plan is actually to land on the surface and get samples back this thing, and so the mission life is just 1 lunar day, which is 14 Earth days. And the landing site is near the station Shiv Shakti. This is the place where Chandrayaan 3 had exploded, the landing site over there. And then there'll be follow-up missions, Chandrayaan 5 and 6, again which will explore long-term presence on the moon, including potential development. And there's a lot of thing about many countries going back to the moon. And there is what is called the Artemis Accords, and India is part of the Artemis Accords. And there's a whole set of countries going back to the moon, which includes Russia, it includes USA, China, Japan, and India also. So, so in short, the lunar exploration process is still something going on, and we look forward to more things that will come out of it. But let's say happy National Space Day to everybody on August 23rd. Thank you.